Gotta get TikTok going too. Let's see. That should be starting. Okay, well, looks like we're online here. I want to make sure that I can get chat from LinkedIn. That's important for me. But I don't know until someone starts talking, probably. It's weird when I set these up and they're not pre-scheduled. For some reason, I can't see the LinkedIn event. It doesn't make any sense. So it will stream to LinkedIn, but then it's like, nope, like we're not going to show you. So today I'm going to be coding, which is hopefully, it's never going to go smoothly, but hopefully not too rough. It's going to be WPF, so we're going to be looking at C# and WPF together. I had a stream on this not too long ago. I wanted to do this morning, but I was just too tired. I had to give in and sleep in a little bit so I could have a good day at work. Sometimes it happens. So I'm going to get going. I'm going to pull up Visual Studio. Let's see where I'm at with this stuff, though. That's not the thing I want to get. I'm going to share my screen in just a second. I want to get stuff kind of set up so that I can share. I want to spend a little bit of time talking through bindings and value converters in WPF. This is going to be probably, I said it shouldn't be too rough. It's probably going to be kind of rough. I haven't had to deal with either of these in a long time, and that's okay. So let me go ahead and get my IDE set up here. I'm probably going to use one of the projects I did before, and this is going to end up on YouTube, so not just this live stream being recorded, but I am going to try to chop up parts of this and redo them so that I can put them on YouTube. So if you're watching through this and you're like, hey, this is pretty cool, I'd like to see a more like succinct version and not just Nick fumbling around, then you can check those out when they're on YouTube. So okay, gotta get this thing opened. I think this is the one. Yeah, this should do. Okay, let me get my screen shared here. And then I gotta bring myself back. There I am. Is that not showing my screen? What the heck's going on? Oh, you know what? I switched some of my stuff around. Let me go back for 1 sec. This is annoying. Actually, man, let me explain what's going on. I changed my setup for my KVM to be able to go between my setups, and it now does not know what screen to capture because technically it's a different screen. So I need to adjust this. It should be pretty easy though. Let's see. Yeah, that's the stuff. Cool. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me get my stuff set up over here. Cool. It's never that smooth, is it? Okay, so what we're going to be doing is looking at WPF code. So this is from one of the sample apps that I already put up on YouTube. And I want to jump over to the main window here. And we're going to talk about bindings a little bit. So let me get this collapsed a little bit more. When we have bindings, the ones that I did in the demonstration on YouTube and the stream before, these bindings are very simple one-way bindings. So kind of boring, right? So the way that they work is that if you look at either the title of the window or this content property for this label, they are bound. So there's a binding to a custom label or custom title. And you might be asking, okay, well, where are those things? I think I made a view model. So if you're not familiar with how that stuff works, this is a view model. We set it to the data context on the window, and that way we can bind to things. But it's one way. So that means that we're only reading things from the view model. Now, we can do more than that. So we can have like the ability to write. The fact that we have bindings means that we can change things on the view model itself And as they change, they can trigger a notification to the view to say, hey, you need to go refresh this property so you can re-show the new value there. So we can go do that. And then value converters, just to explain briefly what that is before we start going into mucking around with some of this stuff. A value converter, you can see that on these properties, I have a return type and it's a string, right? In both cases. There are situations where you may be working with a different type on your view model, right? So in this case, it's a string. Maybe you have an enum, right? And you have some state. So you want to be able to map some enum value to a string value in the user interface or to a different user interface state. So like, I think visibility is what we call it in WPF. Let me just double check. Yeah, visibility. And you can see visibility here is collapsed, hidden, or visible. So it is an enum with 3 different states that you could have inside of it. So the interesting thing is if you were making a view model, you might want to basically just have like visible and it's true or false. And actually that's one of, in my opinion, like the most common thing that we see with bindings is like visibility. Instead of being tri-state like you see here, we just want to have it as a Boolean. And that way, if you were to have your view model, my goodness, speaking is difficult. If you could have your view model set its property like is visible is set to false, then you would need a value converter to be able to translate that Boolean value into one of these 3 things, because the binding on its own just won't work, because Boolean is not the same type as these. So it's going to be, I'm probably going to have to hop on the old Google to figure this stuff out, but you would do something like binding, and then you would be able to, we don't have a property for that yet, but we could say like label is visible. Again, this is this is going to be very much a demo and not just like how I would recommend naming things, but you would make this property as a Boolean on your data context or your view model, and then we would be able to say converter. And I think the part that's going to be a little bit confusing for me is that to get resources properly, I'm not remembering how that's going to work. So I'm going to have to look that up, but you would have a, do they have this one built in? I can't remember. I think there's like a Boolean to visibility converter, and I might as well try searching that right now. WPF, Boolean to visibility converter. Yeah, so it's a thing. Right, so we'll pull that up. Of course, this page is kind of useless. It's not really showing the use of it. So one sec. It just says, hey, yeah, this thing exists. Converters in WPF, cool. I'm just pulling up an example because, like I said, it's been a little while. I want to see how to reference it in the XAML because I can't remember anymore. The XAML part, window resources. Okay, so we need, and there's different ways, kind of jogging my memory here. There's different ways that you can have these resources. Like you can have a resource dictionary that you import from other places. So you don't necessarily need to have all of this. And here's Copilot saving the day. Like it already knows what I'm interested in. And it's already saying bool to visibility converters not found. Is that what it's called? Oh, Boolean to visibility converter. Really? No? Where is it located? I'm scanning on the internet at the same time, but that's the name of it. So I wonder, because I don't have local, maybe I can, there we go. Local, you can see up here, there's this namespace that's being imported called local, or being assigned, I guess. So when we had local here, it's trying to look inside of this namespace. This is why I was getting confused. My friends, how open used this VS Code? I don't. Can you re-ask your question on YouTube there? I'm not sure I I understand. Are you asking how to open WPF things in Visual Studio Code? If so, I'm not exactly sure because I only use Visual Studio Code for things that aren't C Sharp because Visual Studio has a community edition and I just would recommend that for C Sharp things. Sorry, I don't have the answer to that though. So the namespace was conflicting because we have this local namespace literally being assigned to uh, our own application's namespace, and we don't have Boolean to visibility converter defined there. So the sample thing that I was copying and pasting code from was getting us to define one of these, and we are going to be doing that. So we are going to make our own one of these. I'm going to use a different example that's not Boolean to visibility, but we will go ahead and start with this one for now, just to show it off. Oh, and then that's not how it works. How is it? See, I still need to look at the tutorials for this. It's like the muscle memory is completely gone for me. This you spend so long doing this stuff and then stop doing it and then it's gone. So how do we actually reference it? Static resource. There it is. So you can see that when I put this this is why like WPF stuff, the syntax is pretty wonky, but once you build the muscle memory, it comes pretty quick. So we have the binding, we have the property that we want to bind to on the data context. This is the property on the control. And then the converter, when we want to reference which converter we're dealing with, we use static resource to refer back up to this dictionary that we have here. And then we can say, like, it'll complete for us automatically. It knows, right? So bool to visibility converter. And this is just a name. You can call it, right? We just give it a name. There we go. What's, oh, and then it's complaining that I don't have this on the data context. Do I have too many? I think that syntax is right. I'm just double checking. Do I got one too many of these? There we go. Wow. Okay. Yay. We have a value converter attached. We do not have this Boolean though. So I'm going to go ahead, go back to here. We're going to set this up. And this is still just a one-way binding, okay? So it's not fancy. I'm going to set it to true to start with. So when we go run this, we should literally see nothing different. We should just see the title on the window and a label in the middle of it. Because by default, that Boolean to visibility converter should allow the value true to map to visible. Okay, so that's good news. I should be checking the output when I'm running just to make sure that I'm not messing anything up and then going to embarrass myself in just a moment because it will tell you if the binding's all messed up. You'll get a bunch of red printed to the console. But I think if we put this to false, we go run this thing now. Didn't work. Oh no. Okay, so that's not working. But I wonder if the output... Let's see. Console output. Is there no... Let me rerun this because it might not have had console output yet. I don't know why that's not working. That's no bueno. I called it the same thing, right? Label is visible. Oh, I wonder... No, that should work. Boolean to visibility. Did I do it backwards? So here's the other weird thing. Because this isn't checked at compile time, this is worth addressing. It's not checked at compile time. So you can go slap any converter you want onto here, and then at runtime, it'll go, oh, like, that's not working. I'm pretty sure Boolean to visibility converter maps the Boolean value on a data context to visibility for your view. Pretty confident. Now, you could write a converter that goes the exact opposite way and does the mapping the other way, but this one should do it for us. So I don't know why that's not working necessarily. I'm just double checking. I don't think I need to set these other things, but let's go double check. And I apologize because binding syntax is absolutely awful. I've never had a good way to like go make this stuff not look terrible. But we can do mode one way. I don't think we need that. No, so that's still not working. So I'm trying to see like if there's something wrong with the binding, and I'm actually surprised that the output window doesn't have any errors. Because if the binding was messed up, we should see that printing out here. And we don't in the bottom, so that's not happening. Now, this is kind of interesting. When I hover over it, saying no data context found for binding whatever. So what am I might be, maybe it's this. I wasn't expecting to get stumped this early on. Mode. By the way, when I'm looking down, I'm scanning an article to try and copy stuff over. So here, I'll just pull this up. I need more screen real estate because I'm using the other parts of my screen to read at the same time. So I'm just gonna walk you through what they have going on in this one, right? So they wrote their own converter, right? They wrote this Boolean to visibility converter, and this is what I wanted to get to, is to write our own. You can see the converter code looks pretty nasty. No offense to the person that wrote this one, they're all pretty nasty. It's just how they look. So I'm not a huge fan of all the things going on here, but you can see that this window we have, right? Same idea. So they just have these resources where we can list, and the Boolean to visibility converter one is built in. I didn't add it. It's totally visible. It better be. Maybe that's what's happening. No, it completed for me. I'm almost certain of it. Right? When I just type BOO, and you can see Boolean to visibility converter already popped up. Like, it knows. So here's the code for it. Converts a Boolean value, right? This is what we want it to do. So we're using the right thing. Good start. Let me pull this article back up. Right? So what we need to be able to do, not this one. Okay, so you can see on this one, this text block, right? I'm scrolling along here. This is what I mean, like XAML code, when you put it on a huge line like this, as soon as you have to scroll to read code horizontally, like, no thanks. But you can see visibility, binding is mapped to is visible checked. And in our code, can I get these maybe side by side? It's going to be pretty rough. We'll try. Okay. Sorry, it's brutal. But I can get my label binding on the screen here, and we can double check across, right? So where was it? Oh, it's up here. No, it's up here. Sorry, that's what happens when I start moving windows around. So we can see binding is visible checked. I had label is visible. That is on the view model. Label is visible. It's public. So that's good. I'm going to take off path again because we're going to try to make it look just like this one. Then comma converter is static resource to the key name, which we did. You can see up here they have bool viz converter, and then they say bool viz converter down here. So that key is mapped to here. That's all good. Comma mode. They have two-way. We don't need two-way though. Oh, is it one way? It's okay. So we don't want one way to source. One way to source would be that our view can basically update the view model, not the other way around. So it should be one way. We are only reading it. Now they do have more on here, but this is important, especially when you have like two-way bindings because you need to know when to trigger the update. So I don't think we need that stuff. So it's all kind of suspicious why it's not working. And obviously it's because I'm live streaming and I didn't practice before I went on camera, but now you know, you know, I'm guilty. Update source trigger. We can try property changed, but there is no property change for that one. It's just by default. So again, I don't really think that's going to fix it. So yeah, I don't know. Now, what we can do is we can go make our own and we can put a breakpoint in there and see what's going on. Because if we put a breakpoint in there and it's not being triggered, then we know it has something to do with the binding trigger. So let's go do that. Let's go make our own. And we're going to start by using theirs because that's just easier. But I don't really like, again, no offense, I'm not a huge fan of all that being collapsed like into one spot. So here we go. Copilot or Visual Studio just on its own pasted this and oh no, it's still all crappy and munged in here. Okay, that's fine. So what do we got? They have a try catch around here. I'm not exactly sure why they would do that. Especially because this is worth mentioning. Again, I'm not picking on the person that made this value converter. In fact, their value converter and WPF works and mine doesn't. So who am I to say anything about this code? But what we got going on here is a try catch, and you can see that all they're doing is rethrowing it. So maybe they just wanted to be able to debug things and put a breakpoint there. I don't know. But what you don't want to do almost all of the time is this. When you catch and you throw a new exception, you're basically recreating a new exception with a new stack trace, and you've lost the stack trace of the inner exception. So if you did need to create your own exception that you were going to throw like this, if you did need to, you would want to do something like this. But most of the time, if you just want to bubble up the exception and keep the information, like the stack trace and everything, you just type the word throw and it will throw the exception that's currently been caught. So if you wanted to do logging, you could do that and then do throw, and it will just allow it to keep bubbling up. That is almost always the pattern I recommend, unless you need to wrap exceptions with your own exception types, add some extra details in there. But that's when you want to pass in the exception. If you just do like exception.message, you've lost like a lot of the context of the original exception. There are some cases where you want to do that. Probably warrants a video. It's the context of that is when I published a video and said like basically what I just told you, like you basically never do that. There are a couple people that said actually they have some use cases for that. Hello, Collins. And the use case that they had was that they have basically like an API boundary. So they're making a library or something, and they don't want inner exception details of their library to go past the boundary of their API for their library. And that's because some of that context is kind of useless for the callers, right? They might say like, why would someone using my NuGet package care about some exception that's like 40 method calls deep? They don't. Like they can't do anything with it. Some people might argue, well, okay, well, if they have a bug they have to file with you, then they can send that information. There's lots of different reasons why you might or might not want to, but generally you don't want to do this or throw a new exception and just have the message without wrapping it. So just a heads up. But we don't need that at all. We're just going to get rid of that. I very much like having curly braces explicitly. It only takes a couple times or one time when you mess up and you miss curly braces, and we can probably transform this into a nice ternary. It's a handy shortcut. So if you want to know what I did there, in Visual Studio, Alt, Enter gets you this little context menu, and you get some refactoring options. And I just did convert to conditional expression. So this is what's called a ternary operator. I generally like these for this type of situation. Once you start chaining them together, it gets pretty gnarly. You can do it. but it's not my favorite thing to recommend to people. So there we go. We just cleaned up that code a lot, in my opinion. And we can go do the same thing down here. This is just what's going on here. There's a lot of they're casting. Okay, the reason so the convert and convert back methods are on the value converter itself, right? So they have to implement them, and these things are designed to basically work with any data coming in and going back out. That's why you see object used here, because we can basically assign anything to an object, and then in the context of our converter, what we need to be able to do is cast it to being something usable. Because just object, if you're not familiar with C#, right? So if we have value here, like you can't do much. This is the base type that all objects in C# have. You can get the type of it. You can check if it's equal to something. That's about it. So we need to be able to cast it, and that means we have to make assumptions about what's coming in. So like you can see here, they're saying we know if someone set this up properly, we know that value will be of type visibility. So they're just directly casting it, which is fine. If you want to be defensive, you could, use is or the as operators and check it, and maybe explicitly throw an exception saying, hey, you have this converter in the wrong spot. You can do all sorts of things. But I'm just trying to see what we got here. And we can just basically return not this if my Boolean logic checks out. So this says, if it's not collapsed, then we return a true. Is that what we want, though? I don't know. Why don't we just say if it's visible? Like, I think that's what we want. Could be wrong. I don't know if these needed to be updated because in a lot more like modern .NET, you'll see that they have nullable on here. So I don't know if value coming in can be null. If that's the case, we will be casting a null value and doing dot equals, which will throw an exception. So I like to reverse this type of stuff around. So give me one sec. That's going to look like this. And that way, this part is never going to be null. There's too many. There we go. Too many parentheses. Just like people, wrapping parentheses around everything. So this should work, I think. Now, what that means, though, is we want to give this a different name so we know we're working with it. I'm going to put some breakpoints in here. Hello, Xcoding from Twitter. Good to see you. Thanks for joining again. This familiar faces, that's so cool. I haven't been streaming for long, so it's nice to see people coming back. So let's call this Nick's Cool Converter. Okay, we're going to go back to our window. And just to call it out again, I did put breakpoints here so that when we go to run this, we can see if this is not triggering. We know something is suspicious with our binding. If it is triggering, I don't know what we're going to do after. It'll be interesting to see why it's not. So, okay. This is where this thing up here, we're going to change that. It can't find it. But now, again, just to show you what I'm doing, you can see this squiggly that's under here. It's saying Nick's Cool Converter is not a supported Windows Presentation Foundation project. Like, it doesn't know what this is. But if I do Alt and Enter again, it's the same thing as going right click and then quick actions and refactorings. So it's saying, hey, I think you should try and use this namespace. And that way up here, remember what I was saying before? You might not if you just joined the stream, but when it had this local namespace up here, it can't find the Boolean one, but now it can. Oh, and it's saying it can't even find it there? Give me a break. Is it not in here? Yes, it is. I don't believe you. It's totally there. Oh, is it that? No, this is right. Let's see if we can do something else. This doesn't feel right. WPF Playground. I'm just going to put a namespace around this. Oh, man. Okay. Give me a break. So I'm just pulling it out. You can't mix the file scoped ones. Like, that's why it's complaining. Because it had a file scope one and then a namespace around it. It's like, hey, like, you got to pick one or the other. So we're picking this one. Xcoding, we are working, or I am embarrassing myself trying to use bindings and converters in WPF. Should be something that's very trivial, and it's just not working. So you guys get to see me struggle through this. And what we're doing is making our own converter. I just copied some code off the internet, modified it a little bit to hopefully make it a little bit more readable. Let me go put this stuff onto new lines so it's more vertical. That way, there's less chance of stuff getting cut off. But yeah, we have this code here that should be able to convert between booleans and visibility. And we can see it's not finding it, even though it told me to go do that. So what I'm going to do is converters. And then I got to put converters here. Well, I guess, so yeah, there's no embarrassing encoding, yes, except for that I did this for many, many, many years. That's the embarrassing part, is like, this is something I did for a large part of my career, and I'm like, why isn't this working? So, no, it's okay. I'm just joking around, not being too hard on myself. But we should be set up. Again, this is making me feel nervous. I don't know why. Do I just have to build it? Oh my goodness. Okay, I know what's wrong. Someone's gonna call me out on this. This part's embarrassing because it's even worse than WPF not working. Okay, so here's the context. This is hilarious. I can laugh at myself now. So this is a code project from my plugin YouTube video. I'm working with plugins right now, and I'm running the sample application, and I'm not rebuilding the plugin. So this entire time, every time I run the code, it was never building the plugin. So what I just did, so two things triggered in my head. I said, I think I need to rebuild this because it's weird that it's not picking this up. Right? But so I rebuilt it, and then it said, okay, yeah, that's good. Like, it found it. And then I said, wait a second, I've been running this thing. When I press F5 and run it, it should build it. If it's supposed to, but there's no dependency on the plugin. So normally this wouldn't be an issue for me because I always use, I shouldn't say always, I generally have a bit of a cheat when I'm making plugin style applications. And that cheat is that if I don't need to do anything complicated in my build system, because if you're making an application that's plugin based, usually you want to be able to configure which plugins you want to have dropped in, say in your build pipeline, so you can dynamically configure it, or you could have it such that you can deploy those separately. So many different circumstances, but the point is they're generally dynamic and you're not building them all in Visual Studio. But the reality is, for a lot of the things I develop, like if I'm working alone especially and I still just want to have plugins to physically separate the pieces I'm building, I do this little cheat that I'll show you. And I've made videos on this, by the way. So if you want to see those, you can just search for plugins on my YouTube channel and you'll see a video that talks about this. I basically reference the projects directly, which you're going to say, Nick, well, that's really dumb. Doesn't that break all the rules? The answer is yes, it does. But it still gives me that nice physical boundary that I'm looking for. But the beautiful part about this is that Visual Studio just handles all of your dependencies for building and putting them in the right spot automatically. So to prove it to you, I'm going to undo everything I just did and show you that this worked from the beginning. Okay, so just I want to make a point of this because it's so funny to me. I'm going to comment out that converter, Boolean to visibility converter. Okay, we're still going to call it Nick's Cool Converter. We don't need that converter's namespace up there. So the converter we just made is not going to get used at all yet. Now, we're still going to reference Nick's Cool Converter here. And by the way, if this doesn't work now, I'm going to be like triple embarrassed. And I don't even think we need these because I think, like I was saying when I was walking through it, I think that's a lot more important when you're doing like two-way binding, and we're not there yet. So we got this label. We already had a binding to this custom label property on our data context, and then we added this other label is visible property. Now we're slapping a converter onto there. It's called Nick's Cool Converter because it's this key from this resource dictionary up here, and it's using the built-in Boolean to visibility converter to prove it. I'm pressing F12. You can see that we've gone to the definition of it. Okay. Moment of truth, and let me do one more thing to prove it here. Okay, I'm going to set this to true. That's all I had to do the first time, by the way. If I would have changed this and it didn't take effect, I would have said, wait a second. So let's run this. We should see that it's visible. And the text changed. So we know the plugin is now updated in the bin directory. Good to go. Let's go ahead and make it not visible. Come on. Come on. There we go. We have succeeded in making usage of a value converter. We've done it. Sorry for wasting, I don't know, how long have we been streaming now? Sorry for wasting almost 40 minutes of your time. But I think there's a good lesson here, right? And we got to debug stuff. So if we can reflect on what was going on, right? The point was that I was changing, sorry, this is kind of small on the screen, I assume, but in the Solution Explorer, my sample application is my core application. We were changing stuff inside of Plugin 1. Plugin 1 was never being built until just now when I went to show you guys. So because it was never being built, it didn't matter if we were changing code. We're never going to run it. So now we got that. Let's go use our custom one. Let's try it out, okay? So we have Nick's Cool Converter. Whoa, that was weird. What just happened? So strange. Okay, I'm going to comment out this one. Oops. And put this one in. So this should do the same thing, hopefully. But the thing that I want to show you is that I put breakpoints in here. And I want to show you inside of the converter. So let's go run this. And you can see already we hit a breakpoint as soon as this control gets shown. And it needs to figure out what state to have. It's going to ask the converter, I have a value. Sorry, this is so small on the screen, but the value says false when I hover over it. So we know it's a Boolean, right? That's why here we can safely cast. So if I step over it, the bool value now says false because obviously we just casted it. But then we can go make a decision about what to do. Right? So that's why we say if the bool value is true, we're going to make it visible. Otherwise, we're going to collapse it. And like I said, it's tri-state. You could change this to be hidden if you wanted. But in my experience, collapse is almost always what we use. And I think that I could be wrong on this because it's been so long, but I think when you have collapsed, it actually allows the layout to restructure because you're basically making the control like essentially infinitely small versus just hiding it. So I think that it allows a layout to change. Might be wrong on that though. So we have that and we run and it does what we want, right? So it returned collapsed because the state was false. But that's how you go make your own converter. So that's kind of neat. But what I wanted to basically do in this stream is get to something a little bit more advanced. It just took way too long to do the most simple part. So, someone had asked, and this is going to go, like I said, it's going to go into a YouTube video. So, I wanted to talk about like the reason I'm picking up WPF to walk through some of this stuff is that I want to show dependency injection, plugins, that kind of stuff in different things related to .NET. I've been showing it a lot more in ASP.NET Core because tons of people are focused on that. It's great. But there's still people building in WPF. I'm not going to Maui yet. I will end up doing that at some point, but I'm going to be building something in WPF as a starting point. And I wanted to show that some of the patterns that we get set up with in WPF, in my opinion, don't lend themselves well to dependency injection. I find this pretty typical with like a lot of UI frameworks for some reason. Just seems like I'm kind of working against them a lot of the time. And that's because I'm being stubborn, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is make another converter. This time we're going to change it to be, we're going to make one that does numbers to strings. Or maybe we could do it the other way, but let's do numbers to strings. Or maybe we could do a two-way binding. Do we want to try that? That could be fun. Might need a text box though. I don't know. Let's go ahead and stick with the one way for now, because I want to get to the point where we try doing some dependency injection with this stuff, because it's not that simple, unfortunately. So we have Nick's cool converter. I'm just going to copy and paste this one. And I'm going to call this one just visibility converter. But Nick's cool converter is going to do something different now. It's going to take integers. Actually, we'll make it take, because this might be more interesting. We can make it take in floating point numbers. So we'll make them doubles. Okay, so when we go to convert, we will get a numeric value that comes in, and then we're just going to return a formatted string. Oops. Look at that. Copilot. Can we do maybe with some decimal places? Is that how we do it? I can't remember anymore. Why isn't Copilot helping me with that? Sure, let's try it. I think that's how you do it. If you're watching this and you know how to do string formatting for decimal places, let me know. We're not going to do convert back, though. We're going to get rid of this. Okay, so it's a one way. We don't need to have a convert back. Just don't need it, so we're not going to use it. Now what we're going to do instead is go back to main window. We're not going to have label as visible anymore. We're going to have a cool level. I'm just making stuff up. I'm sorry. I don't know. 42.1337. And that's going to be the cool level. And if you recall, if the formatting I did works properly, and it probably won't because I can never remember the string format stuff, we should see 42.13. And it will have the string in front of it. I think it said like this value is. So that's cool. But now we got to get cool level on. And actually, we don't need custom label anymore. So custom label, oh, I got rid of the wrong thing. We don't need custom label anymore because we're going to use that label to do that for us. So Nix Cool Converter, we're going to get rid of the visibility. So we're not changing that around. We're just going to leave it visible by default. And the binding will go to Nix, what do we call it? Cool level. And then converter. Remember the syntax static. Nix Cool Converter. So this should in theory work. And the idea is that we're going to use Nix Cool Converter, which is the one I just updated to do double values being formatted to strings. And then we will set that in the binding right here. And because I did that Visual Studio trick to make it a dependency, it builds. And you can see it worked the first time. So again, the value converters allow you to bind to things, and you can use them with two-way bindings as well. But they allow you to bind to things and then convert the data type that's on your view model to the thing that your control needs. So hopefully that makes sense. They're used all the time. And that's because a lot of the time, I shouldn't say a lot of the time, depends on your preference, I guess. You might say, like, why doesn't your view model for the visibility thing, instead of bool is visible, right? Like, why don't you just have visibility? Why don't you just bind to that directly? You can. You can absolutely do this. The reason I don't do this, I gotta be careful how I say this, because I do this, but it's another technique. So when I was building WPF applications, I actually separated things where, this is going to sound really bizarre, but you could basically have the entire user interface without showing a user interface, like it was all done in code. So we had essentially separation between the XAML views and their view models. So that was an entirely different layer that we could put onto it, but we could literally go run the user interface headless, which sounds like that doesn't even make sense. And the patterns that we used basically meant that we could swap the entire front end, which meant that you can't have like system Windows visibility in there. Like you can't have that bleeding through into the backend part. I shouldn't use backend because I don't mean like a server, but like to the lower levels that we had abstracted out. And yeah, like, was it overly complicated? Maybe, but we did this. The context here is important. We did this because we were mixing WinForms and WPF, and this gave us the ability to literally build out the user interface. We could test it headless, which was super cool. That was one of the biggest things. We could test it headless, and then we could mix WinForms and WPF in a way that we didn't have to think about it. So there were reasons for doing it. I know as I'm saying it, you're probably like, why would you ever? That's way more complication that you ever need to think about. But there's reasons for stuff. So I would end up having basically like two view models and converters between them. So this is the direction I'm going to start heading in here to explain why some weird stuff happens with dependency injection and value converters and all this fun stuff. Okay. In the YouTube video I made, I explained that one of the tricky things a lot of the time in WPF is that you don't have this type of pattern that I'm highlighting. This is pretty typical, like in a lot of C# code where you make something and you pass the dependencies in through the constructor. But a lot of the time controls in WPF, they're anticipating that you have a parameterless constructor, and then you can mutate them. And what I mean by that is just they're mutable. You can assign values to the data context, and you would do this kind of thing on the outside. So you would go make the window and then assign a data context to it. I just don't like doing that. I like having all my dependencies pass in through the constructor and having things be as immutable as possible. That's generally a goal I have in a design philosophy. Again, doesn't mean it's the right way to do it and anything else is wrong. It's a design philosophy that I like to have, and I generally will fight against frameworks that don't allow me to do it. I do the same thing Some of my earliest YouTube videos were on Unity, like the C# platform for making games. And the same thing there in Unity. It basically makes you fight to go have dependency injection done in what I would consider nice ways. So it's doable, but like you feel like you're fighting the system. So we're about to see how that's going to happen here. Okay, so I'm going to make this very contrived, so I apologize, but it's going to be to prove a point. So we're going to get rid of the visibility one. What we're going to look at is that we need to have a dependency here. So our converter needs to depend on some other class or interface. And that's going to make things complicated because it doesn't work. But I need to come up with a good example, and maybe I shouldn't even say good, that's setting the bar high. I need to come up with a example that will allow us to see that we need a dependency in here. So let's do this. This is going to be really silly, but I'm going to have public sealed class string formatting helper, okay? And I'm going to do public string format double int decimal places. Oh, was Copilot going to do that for us? Come on, Copilot. Wow, that's super weird. Cool, I guess. So we got that, and we're going to say that this thing needs this dependency. Okay, so private read-only. Shortcut that I'm doing here, this is really handy. Sometimes if you know the dependencies you want, you just list them. And then you can do this kind of thing, generate constructor. So again, to show you what I'm doing there, just over the field, and actually, can you do it up here too? Yeah, let's do this one. So I have a field, it's not assigned. If I go up to my class name, I'm just doing the refactoring menu, right? So Alt, Enter, and then you can see there's generate constructor ... Press that, and you can see it's like, hey, you got these fields. They're not assigned. Do you want to make a constructor with that? And I'm like, heck yeah, I do. So there we go. When you have one, it's not so bad. But if you know you have like 5 dependencies and you want to go make a constructor really quick, that's a good way to do it. I'm just going to show you guys because I think some people lose their mind over this stuff. But I am very keen on primary constructors, but only when I am doing dependency injection, which we're going to do. So it's a good opportunity to do it. People don't like this because it's not read-only, and I agree, like that makes me kind of upset. But what we're not going to see in this code is this. If someone were trying to reassign one of these, like that would be a, like, what the heck are you doing kind of situation, because it's just a dependency that we don't own. So the fact that you can write that because it's not read-only, I understand, like that doesn't feel good. It's just the least of my concerns right now. I'd rather have that declared on one line versus how many, is it 3 spots? Right? 1, 2, 3. So I'd rather have it just like that. Oh, it's funny. I pressed the keyboard shortcut and the TikTok live studio on desktop steals your keys. By the way, I don't know if folks watching this have ever, if you stream on TikTok or anything like that. I pressed control, or I pressed something in Visual Studio, and TikTok was like, hey, are you trying to make a poll? And like stole my focus. Like, I'm not trying to make a poll. In fact, I'm not even using, I'm not using your application. Why are you taking my keystrokes? Suspicious. Okay, so we have this converter set up. We have a dependency that we're passing in. We're going to see pretty quickly it's not going to be too great. So var formatted We'll do that. Come on. One sec. Apparently, my TikTok audience doesn't love my streams, so TikTok's like, "Hey, are you like, you okay?" Yeah, I'm okay. Send some viewers over. Um, so we have. Oh, did I? I'm silly. No one in the chat called this out, guys. I need, I need the value that I need to format. Okay, Copilot. Here we go. So many little embarrassing moments for me today. So now you can see we're passing the numeric value into here. I'm saying 2 decimal places. To change it up, let's make it 3 so we can see a difference. But the problem is that it can't make this. When it goes to run it, and just to kind of, I want to get you to think through this, right? Like, we have a converter that we just gave a constructor parameter. And actually, I don't know if the tooling is more advanced, or we used to get this before, but have a look at what this tooltip says. Type Nix cool converter is not usable as an object element because it's not public or does not define a public parameterless constructor. It knows. It's like, you can't do this. We don't have what we need. Don't do this. It's not going to work. And we're like, no, like, screw you. We're going to make it happen. Hello on Twitch. Hi. So yeah, you can see object reference not set to an instance of an object. We can't get the value converter. If I bring this up a little bit, oh, there's no good trace there. That's kind of silly, but can we see it here? Not that it really matters, but okay. I just wanted to see if we could see the stack trace for it, and you would see, like, it's like, I can't do this. The value converter's not set. So it's unable to make it, therefore it's null. Therefore, when we go to assign it to the binding, it's like, nope, we can't put a null here. So that's too bad. But that means for this type of thing, we're out of luck. It doesn't work. So your options are, you don't do it, which sucks. And maybe you do something like this. Right? In this example, this works. This is simple. This could have been a static class. Then you don't have to worry about this at all. Like, it's a contrived example. I'm just trying to show you some of the limitations. But if you imagine that you needed a dependency passed in, you can't do it. I just made the most horrific programming language tier list. It's completely biased on my personal preference. Well, as long as C#'s at the top and it's the only language, it's not such a bad list. So this is an option, but, and again, like in this case, I know it's very contrived, so we don't really have to worry this totally solves the problem. But if this wasn't good enough for you based on your dependencies that you needed to work with, like one situation might be that you're like, hey, I need to pass in something where I can swap the implementation. I want to be able to unit test it. I need to put a mock in here for whatever reason. This is maybe not a great reason for it, but if your dependency needed it, this doesn't help you because now you have the real C# is far away from being on the top. Well, you might be on the wrong stream. So you can't pass in through the constructor, which is unfortunate. But what can we do? Right? So if we're thinking about dependency injection, like I was saying, you would probably want to have it on the constructor. We just saw that we can't do it. It needs to be parameterless. So what you could do is, and this, I'm going to show you this. It's not what I like. So it's not what I like, but this will work. I've had to do this in Xamarin before when Xamarin was still a thing. And it's it basically, we're going to do a service locator type of thing, and it's going to use static. I don't like it, but there are situations depending on where you need to do this where you're like, this works in my application. So I'm not here to tell you no. I'm just showing you options. I will explain why I don't like this as well, but I want to show you that it does work. Okay, so you could do something like this. Okay, so we're going to have this kind of thing going on. We can do Nix cool converter with a parameterless constructor. Now, what we need to do, and where this gets really ugly, is a static service locator. So we'll use the service provider. And this needs to be static. Those who said C# is far away from being on the top don't use Microsoft product, bro. Yeah, I mean, to each their own. Like, you can use whatever language you'd like. I'm not here to tell you otherwise, but it might feel kind of awkward that you're on a C# stream. It's okay. I don't mind. You're welcome to hang out. If you want to chat about other languages, that's cool too, but that's not what I'm showing you. So we need to make this public static. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here that I already don't like. This word in particular, I don't like using this word, this static word. It's not that it's wrong to use, it's just that I see it get used in so many places where I'm like, oh, maybe that's not what you wanted to do. It starts to, you can start to go down a slippery slope when you start putting static everywhere. And it's because people start attaching state to static, and then it's like, it's dangerous. So and sorry, I should add more context there. It gets dangerous because some things don't know where the state is being modified, and because it's static and anyone can go touch it, you have instances of things that can see the static state, and it just happens to change whenever someone wants to change it. Like, it can get pretty messy pretty fast. So we're going to do this. I'm sorry. We could do, like, if you wanted to make this better, you could do internal, maybe that helps. So we're going to have someone set this from the outside, but then we're going to do, come on, Copilot. Thank you very much. What? Why does that work? Oh, do I not have, come on now. I think I need to have this included here. One sec. I keep forgetting that when we're not in ASP.NET Core, we don't have this kind of stuff alongside it. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding the dependency injection extensions onto the plugin project, because that's where we're working, right? So now you can see this does work. So I was just missing a NuGet package reference that gave us this extension method. So let's talk about this, because I don't like it. But it's one way you can solve this. And to make it a little bit better, throw if null. Okay, so you can do this. Do we even need that name of? I think you can do that. So we can have a little bit of protection, like, hey, you got to go set this thing. But it means, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not great, right? So we can now resolve this dependency from a container. So if we go put this thing, and actually, because I'm going to give you some more context, we're using Scrutor and iService collection. So combined, this thing will get registered, and we will be able to resolve it automatically, which is super cool. If you're using AutoFac or other dependency injection frameworks, even just iService collection without Scrutor, you would need to go register this class somewhere so that we knew that we could resolve it. But this will get handled automatically now. Just to briefly show you where that is, because that was in a YouTube video, this code here will scan all the assemblies that we have from our bin directory. So that's what this code's doing. it will register all of those classes from those assemblies as the classes themselves, as well as the interfaces that they implement, and it will give them a singleton lifetime. So they will only create one instance for the lifetime of the application. WidWiki, I have experience coding in C# from Unity, and I want to try using advanced C# built through Xamarin, WPF, or maybe ASP.NET, but still confusing with interface. Can you give me some tips about that? Yeah, can you, when you say it's still confusing with interface, can you elaborate a little bit more? Because I saw that you mentioned that, you know, through Xamarin, WPF, or ASP.NET. So kind of like there's a handful of different tech stacks you could look at, but it's still confusing with interface. Do you mean like when I'm declaring an interface, like something like this? Like, is this the confusing part for you? Or can you clarify a little bit more in the chat, and I will try to answer as best I can? Just let me know. So that thing is going to get set up, coming back to here, right? This is going to get registered. And in fact, Nick's cool converter is also going to get registered. Not only as an I-value converter, but as the class itself. So both these things get set up. What's missing, though, is that in order for this to work, we need to be able to do... I don't even want to do it here. Like, I don't know a good spot to do this. And it's going to be cheating as soon as I do this. Let me explain, though. Nick's cool converter. What? Oh, it's internal. I protected myself. Okay. Jumping around a lot here. So, don't tell my boss. I should be working, but I'm watching you. Well, that's okay. I appreciate it. Plus, this is education, right? So, it's good for work. Yeah. Okay. Good. Like using iService collection or value converter. How can I know when I'm using that? I'm still not totally sure I know how to answer your question, WidWiki. So I'll explain maybe something very basic. Okay, so let me come back over here. When we're making objects and stuff in C#, I'll start just very basic. So you make a class. I'll go even more basic. You start with an access modifier. So public means that we can see it from within our own project that we're working in, and people that have our project can also see this. So you can do public, there's private, there's internal, there's a whole bunch of different access modifiers. So you start with one of those, or you can just go right to class. Class is the keyword that lets you define your own type, and it will be an object. So Nick's object. So this is like the most basic class that you can create in C#. Okay, so this is your own new type. Great, doesn't do anything though. But an interface, if we go do, right, the difference between these two things is this is an implementation. So what's a good way to say this? Let me scroll up a little. I can make a new instance of one of these. Okay, I can make a new one because I can say this is an object and I want a new one of these implementations. So that's what I am able to do. But what I cannot do, I can't do this. So the way that I'd like you to think about this, and I'm going to expand on these a little bit more in just a second, but the way that I'd like you to think about these things is this is an implementation of an object, and this is just the API. Now, you have a great question. Do I need to create an interface for every class like headers in C++? Absolutely not, which is great. So to give you an example, we're going to do public void cool method, and it's going to write to the console. Okay, so we can do this. Okay, so you can define your own type with an implementation for methods and stuff like that. So this is like, you don't need this interface at all. At all. Doesn't have to exist. We can still have our object. You can still call the methods on it. So you don't need headers or anything like that. But what's different is that the interface gives you an API that you want to call. So you can't make instances of the interface, but the perspective that you want to take with an interface is like, I don't care who made this thing, right? I don't care what it is. I just need to know that it has these method calls on it. Hello, Trebiax, if that's how you pronounce your name. Good to see you here. So you don't need to think about instantiating these. You just, from the perspective of using an interface, you're just saying, as long as it has the method call available, I don't care what the implementation is. And to show you, to continue this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, we have cool method on the interface. Good morning, Rambling Geek. Good to see you back. Thanks for joining. So what we can do is have this, right? So now we're saying that this Nix object implements this interface, right? And if we took this code out, it's going to complain. It's like, hey, no. You said if you're implementing this interface, you must have all of the methods, the properties, whatever you define, you need to have those as part of your implementation. So you have to do that. So now what we could do up here is like, this part stays the same, but what's kind of cool is I can do this, or I could do right. So when you're reading this code, you know that object 2 is equal to new Nix object. Like literally you can read it here. But when you're looking at object 2, it's just inix interface. All that we know is that we can access those things. So public void some other, right? So I got to put something on here. Okay, so if we look up here, we can see some other method on here, right? So these two methods literally exist right here. We can see both of them. But we said inix interface only has this one method. So from the perspective of this thing, you're like, I don't care what the implementation is. I just want to work with an interface. It's just an API contract. You can put whatever you want behind the scenes. And that's why we can't actually see some other method here. You can see that the autocomplete, the IntelliSense is like, there's nothing that has that method. And that's because object 2 is just inix interface. Now to go one step further, before I go back to the other stuff, is like, I want to get your username, so we're going to put it in the video. So widwiki. Okay, so I want to get just some other method name on here. So widwiki also implements inix interface. And again, the only thing we care about from inix interface is that it has cool method. It's the only requirement. So if we go back up here, right, we have that. Let's just call this the interface just to make it a little bit more explicit for what's going on. So, and we'll call this, we're going to do the same thing down here. Thanks, Copilot. You always know what I want. Okay. So we can put Nix object here. See how this code still works? Let's make it even more obvious. Let's change this to, I want to give them more unique names so it's less confusing, but I realize as I'm jumping around it might be confusing. So we have this method, right? We can do something with interface and we can pass in Nix object, right? This code only cares about something. It doesn't matter about the concrete implementation. It doesn't care if it's Nix object. It doesn't care if it's WidWiki object. Literally doesn't care as long as it meets this API contract. And that API contract is that it has a void method with no parameters. That's all it cares about. Now, I'm losing my voice. Keep it together, Nick. Okay, so up here, though, we can pass this in and it still works. So, okay, so using interfaces limit the object method to be exposed. That's one, you can use it for that for sure. The way that I like to think about it is if you think about the context of this method, right? So if I know that I just want to call something, maybe we can come up with something better than cool method. What's a good way to do this? If I start giving these things better names, it becomes more and more obvious, okay? So let me do this. TikTok saying I don't have audio. There we go. It's lying. And we'll do these better names. One sec. Oh no. Okay, so gave these some better names. Now let's look at this code. So this stuff is very obviously like calling the concrete things. When I say concrete, I mean like the specific implementation. Sorry, I'm realizing my terminology might not be helpful. But if you think about this code here, do something with a database, right? It's amazing what naming can do to try and clarify examples. So you can see this code here is like, I literally don't care what type of database you're talking about. I don't care. It doesn't matter for the work that I have to do. So your question or comment was like, is interface to limit the methods being exposed? That's one thing you can do. But I also look at it primarily as I'm writing code that only cares about working with a certain API contract, and I don't care about the implementation details. And that means, like in this example, one day you could go ahead and swap from MySQL to Postgres and see how this code didn't have to change. Like that's the power of interfaces, in my opinion. You're absolutely right, though. You can use it to scope down things. Sometimes I will chain together like a read-only version with a mutable version of objects, and you can limit scope. So there's lots of things you can do that way, but I hope this example was helpful to see that like we can swap. Literally, I pass in a different implementation, but this thing doesn't know. As long as you can connect to the database, I don't care what database you are. Let me know if that makes sense, though. I'm ending that example, so it better make sense. You can have multiple classes that implement the interface, which then implement different methods for different databases. Yeah, you could do that for sure. So to repeat that, then you can have multiple classes that implement the interface, which then implement different methods for different databases. Yeah. So the example that I just deleted because I was moving on. No, it's good to kind of round that out. But yeah, you could have generally you would have more than just the one method, and you might implement the pieces of that specifically to Postgres or specifically to MySQL. A logger is another good example, even though it's simple. I want to log to where? The console. I want to log to Azure. I want to log to, I don't know, pick any other service that exists. But like, you don't, every time you go to log, you don't want to write code that says like log specifically to Azure, do this funky thing. You just want to say like log this stuff. Like, I don't care where it's going. Someone who's configuring the app will go set it up with the right implementation, but everywhere else just has an iLogger. Someone will give me the right one. That's not my job to know. Someone will give me the right one. So hopefully that helps. Thanks, Rambling Geek, for jumping in there too. Okay, so the thing that we were looking at before that, good question. Thank you for asking that. The whole point of me streaming is to answer stuff, not just blab at you guys. So the challenge is that we got to set this thing. And for folks, I got a disclaimer for folks that are joining the stream. I don't want to do this. I'm just showing you one way that can work with a service locator pattern. It is an anti-pattern. It is an anti-pattern, but we cannot pass things in through a constructor on a converter. It's just not allowed. You cannot construct these things with parameters. Hi, John Murphy. Welcome. So what we're trying to do is say that, look, like, so yes, anti-patterns, try to avoid them. You may have situations where you're like, look, this will solve my problem. And if you understand the limitations and, the constraints, like, then do it. Like, there's no one, if the code works, the code works. Like, it's hard to argue with working code, but you need to be able to understand the trade-off. So I want to get this working and kind of walk through where the challenge is. The challenge that we're facing right now, though, is that we got to be able to assign this thing. And because I'm doing plugins, this is really not going to work. And so I apologize that this is a very, very bad example to try and make this thing happen. The reason it's not going to work is that for us to be able to ever use the cool converter, what we must do, I think I found a solution. I might come back to this. But what we must do is we have to set this static property. We have to say, to enable the service locator pattern, I'm giving you the thing that lets you locate services. And we're doing it with this nasty static property. But we need a spot to do that because this is internal and because it's within a plugin, right? It's really hard to see the text, but WPF Playground plugin 1, we're in a plugin. Our core application should not see this thing directly. It could because I'm cheating and we added a direct reference to it, but I don't want to break my rule. I'm trying to keep these things separated for a reason. So how do we make this work? Now, I don't know. You can do this in AutoFac, and I don't know if you can do this with iService Collection. But what we could do is maybe extend the service locator pattern. And I know it's gross. But hear me out. We could do this. This might be an option. And then we would say, so what I don't know with iService Collection, and I want to talk about AutoFac for a moment. I used AutoFac extensively for my dependency injection. It does allow you to basically locate the container. Like, the container itself is registered onto the container, so you can ask for the container from the container to do things with the container. Yo, dog, I heard you like... You know the meme, right? So, I don't know if we can do this. We're going to find out super quick. If it just blows up, then we know we can't. Oh. Oh, we can do it. Very cool. So you can see, or maybe you can't because the font is very tiny. Let me get this out of the way too. That's a lot of noise. Service provider is populated with an instance, which means we can set the service provider, which means our converter works. So I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I hate this. I don't like this, and I want to explain why. Yes, it's working. It's like, it's just breaking a lot of like principles that I'm not a huge fan of. I am a fan of working code though, so if we were in a pinch and I was like, I don't have a better way to do this and we have to ship to customers, I would say, hey, this works. Get it out the door and let's brainstorm after before we go too far with this pattern. Because if we're going, we don't like this, it works though, customers don't know. They want working stuff. It's up to us to come up with better solutions. So that might be an opportunity where I would say this is going to be conscious tech debt that we take on. Okay, so this could be one iteration. We just proved that we could basically do service locator pattern, effectively resolve. This is the difference. We're not injecting dependencies into the converter. We are resolving them by pulling them in. It's kind of weird to think about, but instead of having the thing automatically get resolved and passed in the dependencies through the container, we're literally inverting that pattern and we're saying, hey, I'm new here and I need these dependencies. Give me them. Like, let me pull them in instead of being passed in. So not a great pattern. In fact, it's an anti-pattern. So this does work. And so to talk about the things I don't like, one is that not only did we have to go do this and set up the service provider, if you had more converters, right, not just Nick's converter, we got the John Murphy converter, right? We got the Rambling Geek converter. And any converter we add that needs dependencies, are we going to have to do this kind of thing? Like, basically, I like thinking about things. If it's a one-off and I can live with it, sure. But converters with dependencies, the likelihood that you can have more than one of those means that I need to come up with a pattern that's going to let me extend that to basically N and not be like, I hate everything I'm typing. That's the goal. We don't want to hate everything we're typing if we can help it. So in this particular case, I feel like I'm going to end up hating everything I'm typing if I have to keep doing this. And the fact that now my main window has the responsibility to go wire these things up, like it doesn't feel good. It just doesn't feel good to me. It's kind of like we're breaking a rule with, doing the service locator, and then we're like breaking it even more. Just, it's not great. What's another way that we could do this though? I don't know if, let me try to get my train of thought here. AutoFag has build registration callbacks. And we could, in AutoFac, we could say, hey, the container has been built. Go run this logic now that it's been built. And then we could basically wire these things up to do that. Basically assign the container to allow us to do the not so great service locator pattern. So that's one way. But I think there's a way that we can avoid this altogether. And when I say I think there is, I mean, I know there's a way we can avoid this altogether, but I'm probably about to go embarrass myself again because it's been so long. So this all comes back to WPF being a pain in the butt from some design decisions. And when I say that, I mean, the people that put WPF together are obviously extremely smart people, and they made tons and tons of decisions that they had to debate. So I'm not saying they did the wrong thing. Like, I am not the right person to criticize all of the work and effort and thought that went into WPF. So clearly they've done an amazing job. But the problem all comes back to this stuff. The more things, and this is sort of like a meta point that I'm trying to get across in some of these videos I'm putting together. The meta point is that the more stuff that you're putting into XAML, the more of a pain in the butt you're going to have. If I can say it that way. It's because XAML is making stuff easy for you. It's like magic, right? The fact that it could do the thing with the converters to get them made for you, like, that's magic. But it's magic because it's using reflection and code generation behind the scenes, and it has limitations. Like, it needs a parameterless constructor, and then it falls apart as soon as you need to deviate from the constraints. So for me, telling me, hey, you can't have dependencies passed into something, I'm immediately like, don't tell me what to do. Like I pass my dependencies in and you're not going to stop me. So it all comes back, like I said, to having stuff declared in here. Now, what we can do, and this is, again, I'm probably going to butcher this. I think we can do away with this. Okay, so we're not going to have resources for the converter. And we might even do away with this. So we'll get rid of this. I think, if I recall correctly, we can stick with this binding. But we have to do something else now. We have to give this control a name. And what I'm going to do is go back to this code. Yeah, it's in main window. I'm also going to get rid of that. And I think if we do cool label, because now we've given the control a name, we can access it in the code behind. Can I do, there's set binding. Is there no get binding? Oh, get binding expression? Oh, man. Oh, man. It's been a long time. Okay, I'm going to bring up my trusty friend Google again. Okay. So, what I want to search for is WPF modify binding in code, because that's what we need to do. And I am searching for it right now, so I apologize. This example is telling us not to modify the binding, but basically just to go make it. So maybe let's take that advice. Okay, so there will be no binding. Oh, you know what? We might be able to do it, but okay, I'm remembering dependency properties now, because this is a weird thing. Dependency properties are the properties on the controls that support binding in the first place. So I'm just copying some code here. You could have asked Copilot inline. Yeah, I guess I could have. I could have asked Copilot. Oh, you know what though? I can't. I forgot this from another stream. So I've been streaming and making YouTube videos from my gaming rig, because my laptop, this is a big flop of Alienware. My Alienware laptop, which costs too much money, apparently has a problem just in general with the audio card. It just is bad. And it's like a known thing apparently with these laptops. And I spent like, I don't know, about 8+ months like fighting with my microphone setup and stuff. I was spending tons of money on Amazon trying things out. Just turns out it's a crappy audio card. So on this machine, I forgot I don't have like Copilot chat set up. I don't think I did it. No. So when I hit the shortcut, it's not coming up. So, but maybe I could do it with comments. This might be fun. Let's see if Copilot can do it. Copilot, come on. This is the old way of doing things. Like, what? That's not what I want. Is that it? Wow. Really? Rambling Geek, I don't have it in my menu. And it's because I just don't have the extension installed on this instance of Visual Studio. But fortunately, it just did it all for us, which is cool because now we can make this a dependency that we pass in. Who thinks it's going to work the first time? I don't. So, I don't, but hopefully. Let's have a little look here. So we're saying that we want to, uh, the parameter here is, it's called the path of the binding. So we want it mapped to the cool level, which is here. Give it a converter. The parameter here is called the dependency property. So content is the label's property. So it's a static thing. Pardon me. So you can see like dependency property is an object. It's not even, we're not saying, just to be clear, what we're not doing is saying, like, we're not doing that. We need an instance of a dependency property, and then we give it the binding. So doing this, what this should enable us to do is resolve this thing from the dependency container, which means we can go back. We can get rid of this. We can go use those nasty primary constructors. And it's glorious now because we can break this rule. We can pass in things into the constructor because we're not getting WPF to go build it for us. Come on, please work. Oh, no. Oh, yes, 1 second. This is actually just me being silly. Order of operations. We actually have to build the user interface before we can use it, and it works. Redemption for the 40 minutes in the beginning where I butchered this. But the muscle memory's got to come back, So what we were able to do, just to clarify, is we avoided using XAML to do this binding. And you might say, well, Nick, doesn't that defeat the whole point of using XAML? I mean, maybe not the whole point, but it's a trade-off. If you don't need to do fancy things like this, you don't care about dependency injection, this stuff doesn't come up for you, then like don't worry about it. That's totally fine. But I found in a lot of my WPF development, I wanted dependency injection wherever I could use it, because that's how we were building the rest of everything else, was heavily with dependency injection. So suddenly you start working with a UI framework and it's like you can only use it in a couple of spots and like not really everywhere else. Like it's just not a good fit. It starts to feel bad. So we would go looking for ways that we could do this. And a lot of the time, and as I make more YouTube videos on this, you'll see the pattern is that I start pulling more and more stuff out of XAML, unfortunately. So the XAML just ends up becoming like a pretty lightweight shell of things. And then the code behind is very view specific, very view specific. So I end up doing code behind, but I'm not doing business logic and stuff like that. It's just view specific. I don't know if I want to read your full username out, but hello, Maximus Decimus. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining. So again, what we got out of this was that we skipped the XAML part that had restrictions around no constructor parameters. We could pass in these things because we can do dependency injection on the main window based on how we have things set up, and then we have to do the binding ourselves. Kind of crappy to go write this code, but some benefits that are worth talking about. I can test the binding working this way, which is kind of cool. I can test my converter in all of its glory with its dependencies. So I can start treating these WPF things like just other code. And that was honestly one of the biggest struggles working with WPF for so long, was like the WPF things just don't feel like they're the rest of C# code because they have restrictions around how you use them. So, Rambling Geek, and this is a really good question. So, I assume you will wire up controls and code behind and the layout also. Kind of. So, there's a mix of things. So, this is how I would explain it. So, when I think about the different controls I'm working with, by the way, I should preface that I don't do like any front end web development, like terrible at it. I shouldn't do the negative self talk. I am very inexperienced at front end web development, but I have years and years and years of experience doing desktop applications, so WinForms and WPF. It's just been a long time, but that's where like almost all of my programming experience, probably, I don't know, of the last 21 years, like 17 of those years were building desktop applications. So this is where I come from. When I think about controls, there are going to be pieces of those controls that they have, like, I don't have a better word, like components of the controls that in my opinion, like by definition, they need to be there. So to give you an example, if I go back to the main window, on my main window, if I were making an application, I might have like a menu bar, and the menu bar might be something I want to swap in and out. So I will leave a placeholder for the menu bar, but I need some type of layout on my form, or my window in this case, to say like, this is a spot where we will populate a menu bar. I might have some type of left navigation or some type of like wizard layout where you can click through. And I will say, look, like this is a spot where I need to have navigation. This is a spot where I need to show content. So I will basically have a lot of like layout controls, and then have placeholders to go drop things into. And then, Rambling Geek, to your point, will I use code behind for doing that? The answer is yes. A lot of the time, I wire things up in code. But there's a couple of other things, and I want to make some videos on this, but I came up with a pattern, and I haven't seen it anywhere else. So I don't want to say, like, I don't want to claim like I invented it, but I mean, I invented it for myself, I guess. I came up with a pattern that lets me combine views, and you can mix WinForms and WPF and technically anything that already integrates. But when you do it in the code behind, you can make it look like you're just joining the views together without having to think in terms of WPF or WinForms or anything else. So it was basically a level of abstraction in the code behind where you could do something like, I want to give it a good name because I have to come up with a more unique name. Let's call it, you'd have like view stitcher, and you could say like stitch, and you would say this dot like main navigation. So you'd give it, I can't spell main navigation, you'd give it like the container, like where you want to put stuff, and then you would say like pretend this was like another control, but like you'd have a, can I do a button? Sure. You wouldn't do it for these basic controls. Basic controls would probably almost always just be on the control you were dealing with, but pretend this was a more like complex composite control, and you would do something like this, and it would basically put the button into the main navigation. So you would just write code that did this. If you needed layout properties, you could be like layout maximize, can't type, but basically would give you syntax that looked like this, and then you could basically, I said basically too many times there, you could effectively build out your controls and stuff and dock things however you wanted in code behind in a very simple way, instead of trying to write out like basically all of the initialized component logic. So hope that helps answer, but to your point, yes, it starts going more in the direction of code behind for setting things up. So XAML becomes very lightweight in terms of just layout for the most part. It's like a shell. And then the code behind goes, now that we have this shell, I will use dependency injection to ask for the pieces that I need, and I will go put them into the right spot. So the control itself is still responsible for knowing where things go. That's the important part. It knows where things go on itself, but it's saying, and I even had interfaces and stuff for a lot of these things. So it would be like, hey, look, I don't even know or care about the implementation of the control. So it would literally be like, inix navigation, and you could do this kind of thing. So like, this isn't a control. It's not a WPF control, not by the interface at least, but it would be a WPF. It would be a WPF control that met some interface. And then I inject those things in, and then the control itself knows not about the implementation, but it says, I know that I need these things that meet these interfaces. I will put them in the right spot. But it uses some more like custom mapping behind this nice little API and the syntax to make it a little cleaner. Rambling Geek, been in IT support for subject matter experts for 28 years, 47. Nice. Until about 14 months ago. Moved over to looking after WinForms apps. Yay. Messing around with codes since the Spectrum and C64 days. Cool. Yeah. Like, I'm trying to think, like, maybe around half my 21 years of programming have been in WinForms. Like, that's a long time. And then WPF came around at some point, partway through that, and, spent a lot of time in WPF. But I had to maintain applications that were in both. We literally started one of our applications in WPF, other way around, in WinForms. And as we were building it, other parts of our development teams, because prototyping something and the product was taking off, our other development teams were building in WPF. They said, like, we're building a new user interface. Like, we're starting with this tech. And we said, well, like, it's not going to be good if we're going in one direction and they're going in another one. So we immediately started replacing in our UI. We just started piecemealing parts of it. So I wrote some type of technology like this. I'm calling it technology. It's not really that fancy. It's just a syntactic sugar to be able to combine those things. So it worked with WinForms and WPF together. But I think that might be it for the stream. It's a little bit past my bedtime, but this is a good almost 2 hours of streaming. That's pretty cool. So what you can expect in the videos that will be coming up, and I'm taking a vacation for, I don't know if it's the first time this year, taking a vacation over the weekend. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday I'll be out. I want to get some videos out to my editor to have them ready for this Friday and Monday. But I'm probably going to walk through some binding stuff just to give you a little heads up. So I'm not going to butcher the binding. I'm going to show how to do a really simple binding. I'll probably do 1- and 2-way binding. Then I'm going to do a simple example with the value converter. And then I'm going to do a third video that talks about the dependency injection stuff we saw. So the service locator pattern that we looked at first, and then we will go over to the more like dependency injection style. I might even split that video into two, depending on how much I ramble. I'm trying to get just for context, because if you have opinions about this, I'd love to hear, but I am trying to do a mix of shorter and long form videos. Sometimes the short ones do really well. Other times people are like, hey, like, please do more longer in-depth videos. It's kind of hard to get everyone happy. So I think if I do a mix, it's at least appealing to more people. So I might split everything I just said into 4 videos. They'll be pretty quick. But I hope this was helpful. I will not be live streaming on Monday like normal because, as I said, I'm going to be on vacation. But if you are interested in general, aside from this Monday, Monday nights, 9:30 p.m. PST. I do a live stream that's not coding, but I generally talk about. It's historically been mostly like the topics from my newsletter that I put out, but it's an AMA style. So I talk about general software engineering things. If you want to come check that out, it'd be great to chat with you. So things about like career advice. So people will join, especially if they're like, aspiring software engineers or like just graduated or just finished boot camp. Like, what do I do? How do I get hired? It's very challenging right now, obviously. So if you're not familiar with me, who I am a principal software engineering manager at Microsoft. I don't like saying it, even though you hear me say it a lot, but people were like, hey, you really have to say that a lot online so people know that there's some authority behind what you're saying. I would rather just demonstrate to you the things I know, like how I apparently can't do binding in WPF. But I would rather just show you the things. But people have suggested I remind people. So if you would like advice from me, some of my career, I'm happy to share those experiences, and I'm happy to answer questions for you. That's why I'm doing it. So yeah, won't see you guys this Monday coming up, but hopefully going forward the next Monday, you can tune in. If you're watching this right now, you can expect that stream on the same platform. So if you're like, hey, I kind of just came across you here, but I like watching stuff on other platforms, it's basically everywhere. So Kick, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn. Did I say Twitter? Facebook? It's everywhere. So if you want to watch on a different platform, you're welcome to do that. But it will be on the same platform that you're watching on as well. So good to see you, folks. Thanks for coming back, guys. It's great to see returning faces and stuff. It's kind of cool. So Rambling Geek, good to see you again. I know I'm scrolling back up. X-Coding for sure. Nick Hodge, if you're still here, thank you. And folks, thanks again. We'll see you next time.